A little while ago, I made a coffee table out of a tree stump with roots. I want to show you my process and explain some of my design considerations. This project started when I found the stump on Facebook Marketplace while looking for wood. Personally, I tend to prefer more versatile furniture, a side effect of living in apartments. But this stump was just too gorgeous to pass up. It needed to be made into a coffee table. So I enlisted the help of a friend with a truck, bribed him with lunch, and we hauled it to my local makerspace. Initially, I attempted to clean the dirt off the stump with a garden hose, but it just wasn't powerful enough. I considered taking it to a car wash, but that would have required moving it into a truck, which was more work than I cared for. I looked into renting a pressure washer, but ended up buying a refurbished one from Home Depot as it was almost the same price. You may notice that I picked up several stumps, but I haven't figured out what to do with any of the others yet. Off camera, I used a chainsaw to flatten some of the roots that stuck up. I did this in the dark outside, making it hard to film. I do recommend using a chainsaw that doesn't have a leak in the oil pan, as I threw 3 chains using the saw I borrowed. Despite that, the steps saved time, as I did not have to inch my way down as much when flattening with the router. I made a jig out of some scrap wood to help maintain a flat plane when using the router. It worked well, and I was able to flatten the top and bottom using this method. I recommend making sure your glasses seal around your eyes, as this is a very dusty process. I changed the height of the jig by cutting down the legs incrementally. I will say, flattening such a large item with a router is very time intensive. You are only able to cut off about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch at a time. If you try to cut deeper, you have to worry about blowout. However, a router was the best option, as the only other way to do this is with a sawmill, which I don't have. I then spent a very long time sanding everything. Wanting a very organic shape to the stump, I thought that I would have to sand everything by hand in order to maintain the natural contours. However, I found that because the random orbital sander has a soft pad, I could use the edge to get most of the contours without ending up with flat spots. I also rounded the hard corners where the roots were cut, with the chisel and sander only leaving sharp corners where the top and bottom planes intersected with the side. This step was important to do before applying resin, as I did not want bark or other undesirable items encased in the resin. Early on, I had decided that the roots would support the glass top and the trunk side would be the base. I found and removed a section of rotten wood in the trunk side, which nicely complemented my plans. The stump is very heavy and difficult to move, and I had considered hollowing out the bottom some in order to reduce the weight. The wrought allowed me to easily do this, as it is much softer and gave an organically shaped hollow to match the rest of the table. Obviously, the bottom of the table will not be seen much. However, I want my work to be aesthetically pleasing to look at no matter the angle. This way, even if placed on a glass floor, the table will still shine. I filled the cracks using a knife-grade polyester resin. I ran some tests to find the best color for the wood, and decided on a gold pigment that was a mixture of Aztec gold and sparkle gold. Filling the cracks with gold resin allowed for a smoother looking surface while enhancing the visual interest that cracks provide. I felt the gold nicely complemented the color of the wood, without being overpowering. Plus, it's reminiscent of the Japanese Kintsugi method of fixing cracked and broken items with gold. Knife-grade resin means that you can spread the resin like peanut butter, which allowed me to smush it into the vertical cracks of the stump, without it flowing out. The polyester resin had an ugly yellowish color initially, but since I was using pigments, the initial color was unimportant. The resin has a 20-minute cure time, which is nice because it sets up fast and you don't have to worry about disturbing previous resin deposits. I do recommend working in small batches and spreading it out after mixing, as it is an exothermic reaction, meaning the more clumped together it is, the warmer it is, and the faster it cures, giving less time to apply. Because of the fast cure time, some of the resin in the larger cracks pulled away from the walls due to shrinkage. This was easily fixed by using a less viscous, slower curing epoxy with the same pigmentation to fill any shrinkage gaps, as well as some smaller cracks and voids. Now I could go back through and sand everything again. One thing to watch out for when sanding an object of this size with a random orbital sander is to make sure the pad doesn't get too hot with extended use, as it can melt through the pad attachments. On the flat areas, I was able to use a belt sander. I started sanding with 80 grit, moved to 180, and eventually finished with 220 grit. I tried to sand as much of the inner root structure as I could reach. For some of the even tighter sections, I used a chisel to smooth it down, but even with that, there were still a few places I was unable to reach. Before putting the finish on, I wiped the outside down with a tack cloth to remove the dust. The inner structure was much harder to clean because its very shape held the dust in. I eventually accomplished dust removal by using compressed air to dislodge and a vacuum to suck it up, along with some table flipping and shaking. I gave the stump a coat of boiled linseed oil, cut 50-50 with turpentine, which gave it a darker, slightly wet look. This allowed for it to soak deep into the wood, killing off any remaining fungi or other undesirable organisms and helping to stabilize the wood. Also, because of the thinner coat, the boiled linseed oil dried faster. I then gave it 3 coats of satin polyurethane, also cut with turpentine, providing a protective coat and a little more sheen. I used a spray can of polyurethane to seal the inner structure, as it would have been impossible to reach otherwise. I let the table cure for a month, as it stunk, then moved it to my apartment to avoid additional storage costs at the makerspace. I added height-adjustable feet, using tape to mark the location and protect when drilling. Then I epoxied the plastic inserts and screwed in the feet. I ordered the custom-cut glass from One Day Glass. I looked at buying locally, but was unable to find a place that would give me exactly what I wanted. Even with shipping, I saved hundreds of dollars over buying locally. I have no affiliation with One Day Glass. They just happen to work best for me. I made sure the glass was tempered, as it is much safer for tabletops. The knee lip seemed the right shape to match the stump. In order to find the dimensions for the glass, I measured the stump, eyeballed how much overhang I wanted, and made a cardboard prototype to make sure it worked. I decided that a 1/2 inch thick was the right thickness, as it allowed for some weight to the tabletop, without being too heavy. I chose clear because although low iron is slightly less grain, and thus clear, it is not as sturdy. A pencil polished edge was one of the main things I knew I wanted for the glass, as I felt the curved nature best matched the organic feel of the rest of the table. The pencil-polished edge was the deciding factor when choosing One Day Glass, because I could easily order this option. Since ordering, I've looked at their website several times, and the pencil-polished edge doesn't always show up. If this option is not available, I recommend waiting a few days and see if it returns. They now offer vinyl mounting discs with your order, which is useful. There's also an option for adding holes, which I didn't need. I'm very happy with how this coffee table turned out. It is 5 feet long, 3 feet wide, and about 20 inches tall. I don't have a way to accurately weigh the stump, but from lifting and moving it around, I would guess it weighs around 150 to 200 pounds. The glass is not permanently attached to the stump for ease of transport and just sits on top of the plastic discs, which keep it from sliding. Considering the glass weighs a little over 80 pounds, it's not likely to go anywhere easily. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, and subscribe. And of course, stay creative.